The house that justice built. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in Willow Creek, a suburban enclave of tidy lawns and friendly neighbors in upstate New York. I'm Daniel Carter, 56, a retired high school math teacher turned freelance consultant, savoring the peace of my home at 142 Maple Lane. I'd just returned from my niece's christening, still in my charcoal suit, sipping coffee in my kitchen. The aroma of roasted beans mingled with the faint scent of lilacs from the garden. This was my sanctuary, paid off a decade ago after years of careful budgeting. Then, a sharp crash shattered the calm glass breaking in my living room. My heart skipped a beat. I set my mug down, my mind racing through possibilities. A stray baseball, a clumsy delivery driver, or something worse. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the noise, each step deliberate. What I found in my living room wasn't a clumsy accident, it was an invasion. Four college-aged kids were hauling in cases of beer, a folding table, and a tangle of wires that looked like a makeshift DJ setup. Leading the pack was a lanky kid in a navy polo, barking orders like he owned the place. "Move that couch over there," he said, pointing at my leather sectional. "We need space for the speakers." "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady but edged with the kind of calm that precedes a storm. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The kid, blonde, about 20, with the smug confidence of someone who's never faced real consequences, turned to me with a look of annoyance, not guilt. "Relax, man," he said, rolling his eyes. "My mom said I could use this place for a party. You can stay if you want, but keep it down." I blinked, processing the audacity. "Your mom said what now?" He crossed his arms, unfazed. "Look, I don't know what deal you had with the previous owners, but this is our property now." Mom handled the paperwork. He pulled out his phone with a flourish, as if a quick call would clear up my existence in his world. "I can call her if you're confused." The other three, a wiry redhead, a stocky guy in a backward baseball cap, and a girl with a nervous expression, paused to watch. The redhead shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should check the address, Ethan," he mumbled. "Nah, dude. 142 Maple Lane. This is it." Ethan gestured around my living room like he was showcasing a rental property. "Mom bought it last month. Some kind of foreclosure deal." My jaw tightened. "Ethan, listen carefully. This is 142 Maple Lane, and I'm Daniel Carter. I've owned this house for 15 years. I have the deed, mortgage statements, and tax receipts to prove it. What I don't have is patience for this nonsense." Ethan's smirk didn't waver. "Buddy, my mom's a real estate lawyer. She doesn't mess up property deals. Maybe you should call whoever's been letting you crash here and figure out your situation." The disrespect was staggering. This kid had broken into my home, claimed it as his own, and was now treating me like a squatter. I started recording on my phone. "For the record, it's 3:47 p.m. on Sunday, October 8th. I'm Daniel Carter, homeowner at 142 Maple Lane, Willow Creek. These individuals have broken into my home and are claiming ownership based on an alleged purchase by someone's mother." Ethan stepped closer, too close. "Stop recording, man. You're trespassing on our property." "Your property?" I kept the camera rolling. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you," he snapped, his voice rising with the indignation of unchecked privilege. "Mom's got the papers. She said to call the cops if anyone caused trouble." "Great idea," I said. "Let's do it." I dialed 911 while Ethan called his mother, his fingers jabbing at his phone. I snapped photos of the broken window they'd used to enter, the beer cases, and the scuffed doorframe. The girl tugged at the redhead's sleeve. "This doesn't feel right, Sam," she whispered. "Maybe we should go." Sam nodded, but the stocky kid shook his head. "Ethan knows what he's talking about. His mom's, like, a big deal." By the time the police arrived, I'd contacted my lawyer, my insurance company, and my security system provider to pull footage of these kids breaking in. Officer Paul Thompson, a burly man in his 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped into my living room, hand resting on his belt. Ethan launched into his story before I could speak. "Officer, thank God you're here. This guy's squatting in our house and won't leave. He's been super aggressive." I watched Thompson's posture shift, his eyes narrowing as he sized me up, a black man in a suit, clearly older than Ethan, but somehow framed as the problem. "Sir," he said to me, "I need you to put your hands where I can see them." "Officer Thompson," I said, reading his name tag, hands visible. "I'm Daniel Carter, and this is my house." These individuals broke in through my window 40 minutes ago and are claiming ownership. He's lying. Ethan interrupted. My mom, Margaret Lawson, bought this house. She's a real estate attorney with Lawson and Associates. This guy's a squatter. The mention of an attorney made Thompson pause, his skepticism shifting toward me. I handed over my driver's license, deed, mortgage statement, and tax assessment all in my name. Ethan, meanwhile, had no documents, just his mother on speakerphone. Officer, Margaret's crisp voice cut through. There seems to be some confusion. My son may have misunderstood which property we discussed. However, there are ongoing issues with fraudulent claims in this neighborhood. I recommend verifying this man's documents thoroughly. The audacity was breathtaking. She was covering for her son's felony with legal jargon, painting me as the criminal. Thompson looked at me. Sir, given the potential for document fraud, I need you to come to the station for questioning. Officer, I said, my voice steady. I'd like to show you the security footage of these individuals breaking my window. And Mrs. Lawson just admitted her son misunderstood the property, confirming he broke into the wrong house. Margaret's voice sharpened. Officer, if someone is fraudulently claiming our property, my son may have been within his rights to enter what he believed was ours. I felt like I'd stepped into a Kafka novel. Ethan smirked as Thompson hesitated, swayed by Margaret's authority. Sir, Thompson said to me, cooperate, or this gets complicated. I looked at my living roomy photos, my furniture, my life, and realized I was being escorted out of my own home in handcuffs while Ethan and his friends stayed behind, unsupervised, in the house they'd burglarized. At the Willow Creek police station, the air reeked of stale coffee and bureaucracy. I sat in an interview room, still in my suit, the cuffs off, but my freedom on hold. Detective Laura Bennett, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, entered with a file and 2 cups of coffee that looked like they'd been brewed in 1995. Mr. Carter, she said, settling across from me, we've got a mess here. Detective, it's simple. For kids broke into my house. I called the police, and now I'm here while they throw a party in my home. She spread out documents. Margaret Lawson sent paperwork claiming her family bought your property in a foreclosure. She says you're either a fraud or a holdover tenant. I leaned forward. The papers were convincing fake deeds, a purchase agreement, all dated 3 weeks ago. These are fabricated, I said. I've never missed a mortgage payment. Call Pinnacle Financial. Check my security footage. They admitted on record that Ethan got the address wrong. Bennett played Thompson's body cam footage. Margaret's voice was smooth, manipulative, framing her son's break-in as a misunderstanding while suggesting I was the criminal. She's clever, Bennett admitted. If these documents are real, Ethan's in the clear. If they're fake, she's claiming she was scammed too. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Lee. Daniel, what's happening? Kids are carrying your furniture onto the lawn, and the music's loud. Bennett's jaw tightened. They're throwing a party in your house while you're here? She radioed Thompson. What's the status at 142 Maple Lane? All quiet, Thompson replied. The family's assistant, Karen Walsh, brought documentation. Everything checks out. Did Walsh mention why their foreclosure happened on a Sunday with no bank or title company involved? I asked. Bennett keyed her radio. Thompson, shut down that party and secure the scene. We're dealing with potential fraud. Detective, Thompson hesitated. Walsh said interfering with their property use could lead to harassment charges. Bennett's expression could have curdled milk. They're systematic, she said to me. Margaret sent an assistant to intimidate my officer while her son trashes your house. My phone rang. Karen Walsh, Margaret's assistant. Mr. Carter, you're making serious accusations. We have documentation of our purchase. Continued harassment will result in legal action. I put her on speaker. Ms. Walsh, I'm with Detective Bennett. We're investigating your employer's documents. Detective, Walsh said, our purchase is legitimate. Mr. Carter's claims are fraudulent. Bennett cut in. Ms. Walsh, provide the foreclosure case number. Now, I don't have it memorized, but I'll send documentation tomorrow. That's not what I asked. Bennett hung up. They're threatening me now. That's a good sign. She grabbed the fake documents. Mr. Carter, let's visit your house. I want to see this party. The scene at 142 Maple Lane was chaos. 50 college kids packed my living room, spilling onto the lawn, red Solo cups everywhere. A DJ booth sat on my grandmother's oak table, blaring music that rattled the windows. A kid was urinating on my roses while two girls snapped selfies in front of my house. Detective Bennett muttered, "Jesus," and called for backup. Officer Thompson stood on my porch, looking sheepish beside Karen Walsh, a woman in a sharp suit radiating confidence. Ethan was by my fireplace, red cup in hand, regaling a crowd. Sam, the redhead, sat on my couch, visibly uneasy. "Thompson," Bennett snapped. What part of secure the scene was unclear. "Detective, Ms. Walsh provided documentation proving ownership," Thompson stammered. Walsh stepped forward. "Detective Bennett, I've shown Officer Thompson comprehensive proof of the Lawson family's ownership. Interfering with their use is harassment." Bennett surveyed the chaos. "Are you telling me a legitimate purchase includes throwing a college rager hours after taking possession?" "Young people celebrate differently," Walsh said smoothly. I pointed at a kid stumbling out of my kitchen with my mother's china teapot. "That's my mother's teapot," I said loudly. Ethan appeared at the door, drunk and grinning. "Hey, it's the fraud guy. Got your fake papers?" "Ethan," I said, "get everyone out, clean up, and we can talk like adults." "Dude, you're trespassing," he slurred. "Maybe you should leave." Bennett stepped forward. "Ethan Lawson, I'm Detective Bennett. We need to discuss your family's documentation." "Talk to my mom's assistant," he said, waving her off. Bennett played my recording of Ethan claiming the house was his mother's. His confidence faltered as the crowd realized this wasn't a joke. "That was before we got the paperwork straightened out," he stammered. "Ms. Walsh," Bennett said, "this looks like a cover-up. Your client's son broke into a home, and you're manufacturing documents to justify it." "That's a serious accusation," Walsh replied. "It's about to be a serious arrest." Bennett radioed for backup. "All units, we have 60 individuals on private property. Begin dispersal." The party dissolved. Kids scattered, some jumping fences, others searching for keys. Ethan watched, panicked. "You can't break up my party." "You have the right to remain silent," Bennett said, cuffing him. "You're under arrest for breaking and entering, trespass, and destruction of property. You can't arrest me. My mom's a lawyer." "Your mom's about to have a bad Monday," Bennett replied. She turned to Walsh. "You're under arrest for obstruction and conspiracy to commit fraud." As they were led to patrol cars, I stood in my yard, watching the chaos subside. My house was a wreck, but the right people were finally in cuffs. The aftermath of Ethan's party left my home looking like a tornado had swept through a frat house. Red Solo cups littered the floor, my grandmother's table bore new scratches, and the stench of cheap beer clung to everything. But the real mess was just beginning. As I stood in my front yard, watching patrol cars drive off with Ethan Lawson and Karen Walsh in cuffs, I felt a mix of relief and dread. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Margaret Lawson, Ethan's mother, was still out there, and her phone call to Officer Thompson had shown she was a master at twisting the truth. I knew she'd come for me next. Back at the Willow Creek police station, Detective Laura Bennett was piecing together the puzzle. I sat across from her in the same drab interview room, the bitter coffee now cold. She spread out Margaret's forged documents, deeds, a purchase agreement, even a fake foreclosure notice. They were good fakes, the kind that might fool someone who didn't dig too deep. But Bennett wasn't that someone. "Mr. Carter," she said, her eyes sharp, "these documents are too perfect. Real estate deals, especially foreclosures, are messy. There's court filings, notifications, a paper trail a mile long. This looks like it was whipped up in a lawyer's office over the weekend." "Then why am I still here?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "My house is trashed, and those kids are probably laughing about it." Bennett leaned back, studying me. "You're here because Margaret Lawson's got connections, and she's banking on us blinking first. But I've been doing this for 15 years, and I know a scam when I see one. We're waiting on a warrant to search her law office. If those documents came from her computers, we've got her." My phone buzzed with another text from Mrs. Lee, my neighbor. "Daniel, more kids showed up after the police left. They're taking selfies on your porch." I showed Bennett the message, and her face darkened. "Thompson was supposed to secure your house," she muttered, grabbing her radio. "Officer Thompson, why are there still people at 142 Maple Lane?" A pause, then Thompson's sheepish voice. "Detective, Ms. Walsh's documents checked out. I thought it was safe to leave." "You thought wrong," Bennett snapped. "Get back there and clear it out. Now." She turned to me. "Let's go." I want to see what's left of your house. When we arrived, the scene was worse than before. The party had dwindled, but a dozen stragglers remained, lounging on my lawn like it was a public park. My mother's teapot sat abandoned on the grass, chipped. I grabbed it, my chest tightening. Bennett surveyed the damaged broken furniture, spilled drinks, a gouge in my hardwood floor. This is destruction of property, she said, snapping photos. We'll add it to the charges. As we worked, my phone rang. An unknown number. I glanced at Bennett, who nodded. Answer it. Record it. I hit the speaker button. Mr. Carter, this is Margaret Lawson, Esquire. Came a polished, icy voice. You've caused quite a problem for my son. I'd like to resolve this amicably. Amicably, I said, barely containing my anger. Your son broke into my house, trashed it, and claimed it was his. What's amicable about that? There was a misunderstanding, she said smoothly. Ethan believed we owned the property. I'm prepared to compensate you for any inconvenience. Let's say $20,000, and you drop all charges against my son and my assistant. Bennett's eyes narrowed. Mrs. Lawson, this is Detective Laura Bennett. You're offering money to dismiss criminal charges. That's bribery. A pause. Detective, I'm offering a civil settlement for property damage. Surely you understand the difference. I understand you're trying to buy your way out of a felony, Bennett shot back. We're investigating your documents, and they're not adding up. Care to explain why a foreclosure sale happened on a Sunday with no public record? Another pause, longer this time. Detective, my firm handles complex transactions. I'll provide all necessary documentation tomorrow. Provide it now, Bennett said. Case number, court filing, anything. I don't have that information at hand, Margaret replied, her tone tightening. But I assure you, everything is in order. Bennett ended the call. She's stalling. That means she's scared. By Monday morning, my phone was blowing up. Margaret left 7 voicemails, each more unhinged than the last. Mr. Carter, you've made a grave mistake, she said in the first. I have connections in this county's legal system. Drop the charges, or this escalates. By the 7th, her composure was gone. You think you can play victim and ruin my family? I know your type, Mr. Carter. You're trying to scam us, but you'll regret this. I forwarded the messages to Bennett, who called back immediately. Margaret's losing it, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. She showed up at the station at 6 a.m., demanding to see the chief. She's filed complaints against me, Thompson, and half the department. But we've got something better a warrant for her office. That afternoon, I was back in my kitchen, trying to salvage what was left of my normal life, when Bennett called with an update that hit like a freight train. Mr. Carter, we searched Margaret's office. Her computers are a goldmine. She's been running a real estate scam for months, targeting vulnerable homeowners, elderly folks, people with financial troubles, anyone she thought wouldn't fight back. My stomach churned. What kind of scam? She creates fake legal problems, liens, code violations, forged surveys, then pressures owners to sell cheap to resolve the issue. Your house wasn't her target. She was after 144 Maple Lane, your neighbors, the Thompsons. Ethan got the address wrong. George and Ellen Thompson, both in their 80s, lived next door. George had early dementia, and Ellen was his caregiver. They were the perfect prey for someone like Margaret. So Ethan's break-in was a mistake? Exactly, Bennett said. But when it went south, Margaret doubled down with fake documents to cover it up. That's what blew her whole operation wide open. My phone beeped with another call. Detective, it's an unknown number. Should I take it? Record it, she said. It was George Thompson. Mr. Carter, Ellen and I are worried about all the police at your house. Is everything okay? Mr. Thompson, I'm glad you called. The woman whose son broke into my house might have targeted you. Did anyone contact you about property issues? A long pause. 3 months ago, a woman came by saying we owed back taxes. She had official-looking papers, said we could lose our home. She offered to buy it and sell it back after fixing the tax issue. My heart sank. Was her name Margaret Lawson? That's her, George said. Our grandson, a lawyer, told us not to sign anything. He thought it was a scam. Your grandson saved your house, I said. I conferenced in Bennett, and George repeated his story. By the end, Bennett was livid. Mr. Thompson, bring those documents to the station. You're victims, not suspects. Margaret targeted you because she thought you'd be easy to scare. After George hung up, Bennett and I sat in silence. How many others? I asked. Dozens, maybe more, she said. Her files show she's been at this for years, picking people who can't fight back, elderly, non-English speakers, people drowning in debt. And Ethan? He wasn't fully in on it, Bennett said. Margaret kept him in the dark, but his entitled attitude claiming your house, doubling down, that's how she raised him. He thought the world bends to his family's will. The scope of Margaret's operation was staggering. This wasn't just about my house or a kid's stupid mistake. It was a calculated, predatory scheme. What's next? I asked. We build cases, Bennett said. Margaret for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Ethan for breaking and entering. Walsh for obstruction. And we contact every homeowner she's targeted in the last 2 years. I thought about George and Ellen, who could have lost everything if their grandson hadn't intervened. If Ethan had broken into their house instead of mine, would we have caught her? Bennett was quiet. Probably not. They'd have been too scared to fight. Margaret would have taken their home, and we'd never have looked deeper. You standing your ground changed everything. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom. My house felt less like a sanctuary now, more like a battleground. But I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for George and Ellen, for every homeowner Margaret had preyed on, for everyone who deserved to feel safe in their own home. The next morning, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Margaret Lawson herself, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. She was in her early 50s, blonde hair perfectly styled, her power suit screaming authority. I started recording and opened the door. Mrs. Lawson, I said, I got your voicemails. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice dripping with forced civility. We got off on the wrong foot. I'm here to resolve this misunderstanding like adults. Misunderstanding, I said. Your son broke my window, threw a party, and called me a squatter. Ethan made an error based on my office's information, she said. This has been blown out of proportion. She gestured to her companions. This is Richard Hayes, my attorney, and Michael Grant, my private investigator. Hayes stepped forward, all teeth and menace. Mr. Carter, we're offering $25,000 to cover any inconvenience. Drop the charges against Ethan and Ms. Walsh, sign an NDA, and this goes away. You're bribing me to ignore your son's crimes, I said. It's a settlement, Margaret corrected. Ethan's a good kid who made a mistake. Ruining his future helps no one. Grant, the investigator, chimed in. Mr. Carter, we've looked into you. Software consultant, paid off your mortgage early. You don't need to exploit a kid's mistake for cash. The threat was clearly dug into my life, trying to intimidate me. Here's what's interesting, I said. Ethan didn't just make a mistake. He broke in, claimed my house, and you sent fake documents to cover it up. Now you're offering me money to stay quiet. That's bribery, Mrs. Lawson. Her face flushed. How dare you? Your client just offered to pay me to drop criminal charges, I said to Hayes. That's a felony, and you witnessed it. Margaret snapped. You think you can manipulate the system, Mr. Carter, because you know how to play victim. I've dealt with people like you my entire career. You see a chance to shake down a successful family, and you're taking it. People like me? I said, leaning in. Care to explain? People who cry foul every time they don't get their way, she spat. People with a victim complex who think the world owes them. Hayes grabbed her arm. Margaret, we're leaving. But she wasn't done. You picked the wrong family, Mr. Carter. When I'm through with you, you'll wish you'd taken the money. And get that junk car out of your driveway, it's lowering property values. I glanced at my 3-year-old Toyota Camry and laughed. She'd just threatened me, tried to bribe me, and spewed prejudice. But my car was the problem? I called Bennett immediately. You're not going to believe this, I said, sending her the recording. Margaret just committed 4 felonies on your porch, Bennett said, almost gleeful. Bribery, witness intimidation, corruption, and conspiracy. I'm coming to get your statement. As I waited, another text came from an unknown number. This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started. I forwarded it to Bennett, settled onto my porch, and prepared for the next battle. Margaret Lawson thought she could bully her way out of this. She was about to learn she'd picked the wrong fight. The air in Willow Creek felt heavier now, as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. My house at 142, Maple Lane, once a haven, was now a crime scene, a symbol of defiance against Margaret Lawson's predatory empire. The boarded-up window, scheduled for repair later that week, stared at me like a battle scar. I was cleaning up the last of the party debris: red Solo cups, a broken lamp, and a stain on my rug that smelled suspiciously like cheap vodka. When Detective Laura Bennett called with news that turned my blood cold. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "we've got something big. Margaret's computers are a treasure trove. She's been running this scam for at least 2 years, targeting dozens of homeowners across the county. Your neighbors, the Thompsons, were just the tip of the iceberg." I sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of her words settling in. "How many others?" "We're still digging, but we've identified at least 15 properties she's gone after. Elderly couples, single parents, people with medical debt. She picks those least likely to fight back. She creates fake legal problems, then swoops in as the savior, offering to buy their homes at a fraction of their value." I thought of George and Ellen Thompson, both in their 80s, vulnerable and trusting. Was my house ever her target? "No," Bennett said. "Her emails show she was after 144 Maple Lane. Ethan's break-in was a screw-up. He misread her instructions, but when you pushed back, Margaret saw an opportunity to pivot. She thought she could intimidate you into selling or dropping the case. So this wasn't just about covering for her son? It started that way, but it's bigger now. Her fake documents drew our attention to her entire operation. We found surveillance records, photos of homeowners, their schedules, even their visitors. She's been stalking her targets to find the weakest ones." The idea of Margaret Lawson watching my neighbors, plotting to steal their homes, made my skin crawl. "What's the plan now?" "We're building a case," Bennett said. "Fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and possibly racketeering. We're also reaching out to her victims. Some don't even know they were scammed. They thought they just made bad deals." My phone beeped with another call. It was Mrs. Elena Martinez, a widow down the street who spoke limited English. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice trembling, "I heard about the trouble at your house. A woman came to me last year, saying my house had code violations. She offered to buy it to save me from fines." "Did she give her name?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Margaret something. She had papers, looked official." I almost signed, but my grandson stopped me. I conferenced in Bennett, and Mrs. Martinez repeated her story. By the end, Bennett was scribbling furiously. "Mrs. Martinez, bring those documents to the station. You're a victim, not a suspect. We'll protect you." After the call, I stared out my kitchen window at the Thompsons' house next door. George was watering his roses, oblivious to how close he'd come to losing everything. "How did she get away with this for so long?" I asked Bennett. "She's smart," Bennett said. "She targets people who don't have the resources to fight people who don't know their rights or can't afford lawyers. And she's got connections. Judges, prosecutors, county officials. She's been playing the system like a fiddle." "What about Ethan? Was he part of it?" "Not directly," Bennett said. "Her emails suggest she kept him out of the details, but he's been raised to believe his family's above the law. That's why he was so cocky when he broke in. He thought Margaret could fix anything." The thought of Ethan's entitled smirk fueled my resolve. "When's the preliminary hearing?" "Thursday," Bennett said. "Bring your evidence, the recordings, photos, everything. Margaret's going to fight dirty, but we've got her cornered." That evening, I sat on my porch, the same spot where Margaret had tried to bribe me. My Toyota Camry, which she'd insulted as a junk car, gleamed under the streetlight. I laughed bitterly. She'd built a career on intimidation and lies, but her downfall started with a broken window and a kid too arrogant to back down. Wednesday brought a surprise. My doorbell rang, and I found Sam, the red-headed kid from Ethan's crew, standing nervously on my porch. "Mr. Carter," he said, avoiding my eyes, "I owe you an apology. I knew something was off that day, but I didn't speak up." I studied him. He looked different, less cocky, more human. "Why are you here, Sam?" I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Ethan was my roommate, always bragging about his mom's connections. I should have said something when he claimed your house. "I'm sorry. What's changed?" I asked. "I'm transferring schools," he said. "I don't want to be around people like Ethan anymore. I'm studying to be a social worker, to help people instead of standing by while they get hurt." I nodded, impressed by his honesty. "It takes guts to admit you were wrong, Sam. You're doing the right thing now." He hesitated. "How did you stay so calm when Ethan was lying to your face?" "I wasn't calm," I admitted. "I was furious, but losing it wouldn't have helped. The best way to beat people like Margaret is to stay focused, gather evidence, and trust the truth will come out. Sam left, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe some people could change. But Margaret Lawson? She was another story. Thursday morning, the Willow Creek courthouse was packed. Neighbors, victims, and curious onlookers filled the pews, whispering about the scandal that had rocked our quiet suburb. I sat in the front row, wearing a navy suit, my evidence organized in a folder. George and Ellen Thompson sat beside me, their hands clasped tightly. Detective Bennett was there too, her expression unreadable but determined. Margaret Lawson entered, flanked by two high-priced attorneys. Her blonde hair was immaculate, her suit tailored to perfection, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his bravado gone, replaced by a hollow stare. Karen Walsh, at a separate table, shot angry glances at Margaret, her loyalty clearly fraying under the weight of felony charges. Judge Patricia Hayes, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with silver hair, presided. Assistant District Attorney Emmeline Gwynn opened the case. Your Honor, the state will show that Margaret Lawson orchestrated a sophisticated real estate fraud scheme targeting vulnerable homeowners. Using her position as an attorney, she created fraudulent documents, intimidated victims, and stole properties through deception. Margaret's lead attorney, David Brooks, stood. Your Honor, my client is a respected lawyer with 20 years of unblemished practice. These charges stem from a misunderstanding involving her son, blown out of proportion by overzealous prosecutors. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. Mr. Brooks, are you suggesting that forging property deeds is a misunderstanding? Your Honor, any errors were made in good faith during a stressful situation, Brooks said smoothly. Good faith doesn't involve forged county seals, Hayes replied dryly. Gwynn presented the evidence. Margaret's fake documents, email chains detailing her targeting of homeowners, my recordings of her bribery attempt, and testimony from victims. The most damning came from Karen Walsh, who'd flipped on her boss. Mrs. Lawson instructed me to create documents supporting Ethan's claim to Mr. Carter's property, Walsh testified. She said it didn't matter if they were accurate, just that they'd confuse things long enough to force a settlement. Did she express concerns about legality? Gwynn asked. She called it creative advocacy, not fraud, Walsh said. She thought Mr. Carter would settle to avoid a legal fight. Margaret's face remained stoic, but her hands clenched in her lap. George Thompson's testimony was gut-wrenching. She showed us papers saying we owed thousands in back taxes, he said, his voice trembling. We've lived in our home for 43 years. She said we'd lose it if we didn't sell to her. Did you owe those taxes? Gwynn asked gently. No, George said. Our grandson checked. Our taxes were current. When my turn came, I laid out the facts. Ethan's break-in, his claims, Margaret's threats, and her bribery attempt. Brooks tried to paint me as opportunistic. Mr. Carter, couldn't you have resolved this by accepting my client's generous settlement? That wasn't a settlement, I said. It was a bribe to cover up crimes. You're not a lawyer, Brooks pressed. How can you be sure? I don't need a law degree to know paying someone to drop charges is illegal, I shot back. The courtroom fell silent when Gwynn played my recording of Margaret's rant on my porch. People who cry foul every time they don't get their way. People with a victim complex who think the world owes them. The prejudice in her words hung heavy, exposing her for what she was, a predator hiding behind a law degree. Judge Hayes's ruling was swift. Mrs. Lawson, you've betrayed your oath as an attorney and preyed on the vulnerable. Your actions are a disgrace to the legal profession. Margaret was sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Ethan got 18 months in county jail and 5 years probation. Walsh received 2 years probation for cooperating. As Margaret was led away, she shot me a look of pure venom. Ethan didn't look at anyone. His head bowed as he was escorted out. The courtroom buzzed with relief and outrage. George Thompson squeezed my hand. Thank you, Daniel. We could have lost everything. Outside, Bennett shook my hand. This is one of the most satisfying cases I've closed. You didn't just save your house, you saved a lot of others. I drove home, the weight of the day settling in. My house was mine again, but the fight wasn't over. Margaret's victims deserved justice, and I was determined to see it through. The weeks following the preliminary hearing were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and a slow return to normalcy at 142 Maple Lane. My house, though still bearing the scars of Ethan's partya-chipped teapot, a scratched table. A lingering sense of violation was mine again. The window was repaired, the stains scrubbed out, but the bigger battle was far from over. Margaret Lawson's real estate scam had left a trail of victims, and I found myself at the center of a growing effort to make things right. Detective Laura Bennett's investigation had uncovered a web of fraud that stretched beyond Willow Creek, and I was determined to help expose it. Every morning brought new voicemails from Margaret, left from a prison phone. Her tone ranged from icy professionalism to barely veiled rage. "Mr. Carter," she said in one, "you've destroyed my family over a misunderstanding. Drop the civil suit, or you'll regret it." Another, left at 3 a.m., was more unhinged. "You think you've won, but I know people who can make your life hell." I saved each one, forwarding them to Bennett, who was building an airtight case for additional charges: witness intimidation and harassment. Bennett called me one crisp November afternoon, her voice brimming with controlled excitement. "We've identified 22 victims so far, Daniel. Margaret's files are a roadmap of predation. She targeted elderly widows, families with medical debt, even a veteran on disability. She'd scare them with fake liens or tax notices, then offer to rescue them by buying their homes cheap." I was raking leaves in my yard, the familiar rhythm grounding me as her words sank in. "How much did she steal?" "Over $1.2 million in property value," Bennett said. "She'd flip the houses for profit or rent them out. The Thompsons were lucky their grandson stopped her. Others weren't so fortunate. One of those others was Mrs. Elena Martinez, the widow down the street. She invited me over for coffee, her small living room filled with photos of her grandchildren. "Mr. Carter," she said, her hands trembling around her mug. "That woman came to my door last year. She said my house had violations, that I'd lose it if I didn't sell. I was so scared I almost signed." "What stopped you?" I asked. "My grandson, Luis. He's in college, studying law. He told me to wait, check the records, and found no violations. But I still have nightmares about losing my home." I squeezed her hand. "You're safe now, Mrs. Martinez. We're making sure she can't hurt anyone else." Her eyes welled up. "Thank you, Daniel. If you hadn't fought, I might have lost everything." That evening, I met with George and Ellen Thompson at their kitchen table, surrounded by decades of memories, family photos, a quilt Ellen had made, a clock ticking steadily on the wall. George, his hands shaky from early dementia, showed me the fake tax notice Margaret had given them. "She said we owed $12,000, he said. "We've paid our taxes on time for 43 years. I didn't know what to believe. Ellen patted his arm. "Our grandson saved us. But you, Daniel, you stopped her for good." I shook my head. "You helped too, George. Your documents are part of the case against her." The Thompson story wasn't unique. Bennett's team uncovered more victims. James Riley, a veteran whose wife was battling cancer when Margaret targeted him. Maria Gomez, a single mother who'd almost sold her home to cover fake code violations. And countless others who'd been bullied into submission by Margaret's legal maneuvering. Each story fueled my resolve to see this through, not just for me, but for them. The civil lawsuit against Margaret's law firm, Lawson and Associates, was gaining traction. Filed on behalf of her victims, it sought $2.5 million in damages. My lawyer, Susan Patel, estimated my share at $50,000 for the damage to my property and the emotional toll. But money wasn't the point. The real goal was accountability, ensuring Margaret and her ilk couldn't prey on anyone else. One afternoon, I got a call from an unexpected source, the FBI. Agent Michael Torres, a no-nonsense man with a voice like gravel, explained that Margaret's scam was part of a larger network. "Her computer records led us to 6 other attorneys across 3 states, he said. "They've been sharing tactics, targeting vulnerable homeowners with fake legal threats. We're talking hundreds of victims, millions in stolen property." I sat on my porch, stunned. "You're saying this goes beyond Willow Creek?" "Way beyond," Torres said. "Your case was the break we needed." Margaret's emails linked her to a lawyer in Ohio who's been running the same playbook. "We're coordinating with state agencies to shut it down." The scope was staggering. What started with a broken window had exposed a nationwide conspiracy. I thought of Ethan, his smug grin as he claimed my house, and realized his mistake had unraveled his mother's empire. "What happens to Margaret now?" I asked. "She's looking at federal charges," Torres said. Racketeering, wire fraud, maybe more. Her prison time could double. As the investigation widened, I began speaking at community meetings, sharing my story to help neighbors recognize real estate scams. At one event, held at the Willow Creek Community Center, I stood before a room of mostly seniors, their faces etched with worry. If someone shows up with urgent legal papers claiming you're about to lose your home, I said, don't panic. Call a family member, a lawyer, or the police. Legitimate processes take time. Scams rely on pressure. An elderly woman, Mrs. Clara Evans, raised her hand. What if we can't afford a lawyer? Most states have legal aid for seniors, I said. But the biggest red flag is urgency. If someone's pushing you to sign immediately, it's probably a scam. After the meeting, a young man approached me. It took a moment to recognize him. Sam, the redhead from Ethan's crew, now looking more confident, less like the nervous kid I'd seen that day. Mr. Carter, he said, I'm interning at a legal aid clinic now. I want to help people like the ones Margaret targeted. I smiled. You're making good on your promise, Sam. That's something to be proud of. He nodded. I keep thinking about that day. If I'd spoken up, maybe it wouldn't have gone so far. You're speaking up now, I said. That's what matters. The civil suit settled in December for $2.3 million, distributed among Margaret's victims. My share was $47,000, enough to repair my house and maybe take a vacation, but the real victory was seeing people like Mrs. Martinez and the Thompsons regain their sense of security. George and Ellen sent me a handwritten note, thanking me for giving them back their peace of mind. Mrs. Martinez baked me tamales, her way of saying I'd become family. But Margaret wasn't done. 6 months into her sentence, I received a letter from the state prison. Her neat handwriting was unmistakable. Mr. Carter, you've ruined my son's future, destroyed my career, and torn my family apart. I hope your revenge was worth it. Even behind bars, she saw herself as the victim, unable to acknowledge the lives she'd nearly destroyed. I filed the letter with the others, evidence of her refusal to change. Ethan, meanwhile, served his 18 months and was released on probation. Neighborhood gossip said he'd enrolled in community college and was waiting tables at a local diner. His social media, once a parade of frat parties, went silent. I wondered if he'd learned anything, or if he'd just fade back into entitlement once his probation ended. The FBI's investigation continued to bear fruit. By spring, they'd arrested 8 attorneys across 5 states, recovering $18 million in stolen property. Agent Torres called to update me. Your case started a domino effect, Daniel. We're still finding victims, but we're also finding people who fought back, just like you. I thought about that Sunday afternoon, when all I wanted was a quiet coffee after my niece's christening. A broken window had led to Thesa dismantled criminal network, justice for dozens, and a community stronger for it. But I couldn't shake the thought of how many had lost their homes before we stopped her. How many Margarets were still out there, preying on the vulnerable. One evening, James Riley, the veteran whose wife had fought cancer while Margaret targeted them, stopped by. Daniel, he said, shaking my hand. My wife's in remission now. We refinanced our house, kept it because of you. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, I said. Just keep looking out for your neighbors. He smiled. We all are now. Willow Creek's different because of you. As he left, I sat on my porch, the same spot where Margaret had spewed her venom. The neighborhood felt alive, kids playing, neighbors waving, a community that had learned to stand together. My house was mine again, not just in deed, but in spirit. And Margaret Lawson? She was learning the hard way that some things truth, justice, and a man who refuses to be bullied can't be bought or intimidated. The 3rd anniversary of that fateful Sunday at 142 Maple Lane arrived quietly, marked not by fanfare, but by a block party I'd organized for Willow Creek. It wasn't about celebrating the break-in or the chaos that followed. None of my neighbors knew the exact significance of the date. Instead, it was a celebration of community, of resilience, and of the bonds we'd forged in the wake of Margaret Lawson's predatory scheme. As I set up folding tables on my lawn, the air filled with the aroma of grilled burgers, Mrs. Martinez's tamales, and the Thompsons' homemade cookies, I reflected on how far we'd come. My house, once a battleground, was a beacon of triumph, a testament to what happens when you refuse to back down. The party was in full swing by noon. Kids chased each other with water balloons. neighbors swapped stories, and a local band played soft rock from a makeshift stage. George and Ellen Thompson sat under a canopy, sharing their cookies and smiling at the bustle. Mrs. Elena Martinez, her confidence restored, handed out tamales while her grandson Luis, now a law student, chatted with Detective Laura Bennett, who'd stopped by with her family. James Riley and his wife, now 3 years cancer-free, danced slowly to the music, their laughter a reminder of what we'd all fought for. Bennett pulled me aside, her kids playing tag nearby. "Daniel, the FBI's case against Margaret's network is wrapping up. 12 attorneys arrested, $22 million in property recovered, and over 300 victims identified across 7 states. Your broken window started it all." I shook my head, still processing the scale. "I keep thinking about the ones we didn't save, the people who lost their homes before we caught her." "You can't save everyone," Bennett said, her voice firm but kind. "But you saved who you could, and you made sure Margaret and her kind faced consequences. That's not nothing, it's everything." I looked at my neighbors, now a tight-knit group who checked on each other, shared resources, and knew the signs of a scam. "Any regrets?" Bennett asked. "Only that it took Ethan breaking into my house to expose her," I said. "How many people suffered because no one stood up sooner?" Bennett nodded. "Sometimes justice needs the right person in the wrong place at the right time. You were that person, Daniel." As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over Willow Creek, I thought about the journey. That Sunday, 3 years ago, I'd been a retired teacher sipping coffee, unaware that a broken window would unravel a criminal empire. Margaret Lawson had counted on fear and intimidation, banking on people like me giving up or giving in. She'd underestimated the power of evidence, persistence, and a community that refused to be victims. A year after her sentencing, I'd received a letter from Ethan Lawson, written in careful, deliberate handwriting. "Mr. Carter," it began, "I know I don't deserve to contact you, but I need you to know I understand what I did was wrong, not just breaking into your house, but the way I acted, the entitlement, the assumption my family's money could fix anything. I've been in therapy, working to understand how I became that person. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just letting you know that day changed me. I'm trying to build a life based on what I earn, not what my mom's connections can get me. Thank you for not letting us get away with it." I read the letter several times, struck by its sincerity. Ethan was working at a diner, taking night classes, and staying off social media. Maybe consequences could spark change, even in someone raised to believe they were untouchable. I never replied, but I kept the letter, a reminder that redemption was possible, even if it came late. Margaret, on the other hand, remained unrepentant. Her prison letters, though fewer now, still dripped with blame. "You've destroyed my family, Mr. Carter. I hope you're satisfied." She couldn't see her own role in her downfall, still casting herself as the victim. Her law firm was dissolved, her assets seized to pay restitution, and her name was synonymous with scandal in Willow Creek and beyond. The FBI's investigation had led to systemic changes, new protections for homeowners, stricter oversight of real estate transactions, and legal aid programs for vulnerable seniors. I'd spoken at conferences across the state, sharing my story to empower others. At one event, a woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Carter, I was almost scammed last year," she said. "Your story taught me to check the paperwork and call a lawyer. I kept my house because of you." Those moments were the real victory, not the $47,000 from the civil suit, not the headlines, but the people who felt safe in their homes again. Willow Creek had changed too. Neighbors now shared security camera footage, reported suspicious visitors, and taught each other how to spot fraud. We weren't just a neighborhood. We were a community that stood together. As the block party wound down, I sat on my porch, the same spot where Margaret had tried to bribe me, where Ethan had claimed my house, where Officer Thompson had nearly arrested me. The memory of that day was vivid, but it no longer carried the sting of violation. My house was mine, paid for, protected, and surrounded by neighbors who'd learned the power of standing up. Sometimes justice isn't about courtroom drama or dramatic confrontations. It's about refusing to be intimidated, gathering evidence, and trusting that the truth will prevail, even when the system seems stacked against you. Margaret Lawson had built her empire on the assumption that people would be too scared, too tired, or too overwhelmed to fight back. She was wrong. Her mistake cost her everything. and it gave Willow Creek something stronger, a sense of unity, a commitment to protect each other, and a lesson in the power of standing your ground. I looked out at my street, quiet now except for the hum of crickets and the occasional laugh from a lingering neighbor. My house stood strong, a symbol of resilience, not just for me, but for everyone who'd faced down bullies like Margaret and refused to be a victim. Ethan's break-in had been the spark, but the fire it ignited had burned down a criminal network and lit the way for justice. As I cleaned up the last of the party tables, I thought about Brett's letter, Sam's transformation, and the countless homeowners who'd reclaimed their lives. Justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about building something better, a community that looked out for its own, a system that protected the vulnerable, and a legacy of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Thank you for following Daniel Carter's story, a tale of resilience, justice, and the power of standing up to bullies. This wasn't just about one man's fight to protect his home. It was about exposing a predator, saving countless others, and strengthening a community. What do you think about the themes of this story? Have you or someone you know faced injustice or bullying in your own life? How did you respond, and what did it teach you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on standing up to power, fighting for what's right, and the impact of actions like Daniel's. Your voice matters, so let us know where you stand.